Well, it looks like our old friend Ask Yourself. You know, the guy who's obsessed with his pointless name the trait riddle. I guess he felt like he was destined to ask Sam Harris to name the trait. He attended one of Sam Harris's events where he diligently got in line after the talk for the Q&A so he could ask Sam to name the trait. He got all the way up to the front of the line, and they cut off the Q&A right before he spoke. Well, undaunted, he went to a second Sam Harris event, eagerly got in line for the Q&A, and this time he was successful in asking Sam Harris to name the trait. So let's listen.
I might be a bit atypical. I'm going to ask about animal rights. I guess Brian is into animal rights a bit. So my question is, what is it that's true of an animal that, if true of a human, would justify stabbing them to death for a hamburger? And if you can name such a property, something that, if true of humans, would justify doing this to them, would you be able to spell out the situation in which we do it to them without sounding completely psychopathic? Just to give a quick example, we'll not waste time. If you were to say intelligence, would it be okay to murder low intelligence people? If you were to say that it's the fact that it's natural, would it be, you know, okay to murder humans if that were natural, etc.?
Right. And I'll just say,
Okay, folks, what we're going to do right now is we're going to break down Name the Trait and see if we actually can name the trait. So let's take a look at this little riddle of his, this logical consistency test, as he likes to call it. Okay, first of all, let's look at the very last part of the Name the Trait, where it says, would justify stabbing a human for a hamburger. Okay, first of all, what you do with the body after you murder someone is really inconsequential. The part we need to focus on is the actual stabbing and killing of a human being. So let's focus on the stabbing a person to death part. Next, these truths or traits that we're talking about, we're dealing with descriptive traits that are generally true of animals. So we're not dealing with traits like murderous or continuously destructive. The traits we're talking about here, the truths we're talking about, are things like ability to talk, ability to conceive the future, whether they have eyes or not, small, large, these types of things. So since we're not talking about traits like murderous, and are only talking about traits that simply describe the way that humans are, the common denominator in all these traits is that we're talking about innocent people. So we're going to change the question to reflect that factor. Next, we're going to eliminate the first part of the equation. What is it that is true of animals? Because this is just comparative, and it doesn't get to the key issue here, which is what trait would allow you to stab a human being. So now that we've gotten down to the very core of what is asked in Name the Trait, we see that what's actually being asked is, what is it that is true of humans that would allow you to kill an innocent person?
If true of a human, would justify stabbing them to death for a hamburger.
Of course, we all know there certainly is no trait that an innocent person can have that would allow you to kill them. So this kind of reveals the trickiness of the Name the Trait riddle. It traps you into a position where you have to allow the killing of innocent people. So I'm going to have to agree with Ask Yourself on this, that you cannot name the trait. There is nothing that is true of animals that, if true of humans, would allow you to murder that innocent human. And my reaction to that is, so what? And we'll get into that a little bit later.
If you guys were watching my channel yesterday, you would have seen me upload a video where I asked Sam Harris to name the trait. Devin Tracy of AIU has already put out a salty response, so let's give that response a rec. And of course, Devin, as per usual, I'm happy to destroy you in a live debate. I will pin you into a corner in real time and force you to admit either inconsistency or bite the bullet on some absurd position. You know it, I know it, we're both aware that you could never defend your position. Now go and posture like you usually do, try to seem like you're not hiding, but we can all see that you are cucking into the shadows.
Oh, so AIU is cucking into the shadows because he refuses to debate you? Folks, let's just go over the facts a little bit here. Ask Yourself has about 8 times more subscribers than I do on my 2 channels. I am the only anti-vegan YouTuber who has done videos dedicated to debunking Name the Trait. Videos. I have challenged Ask Yourself to a debate, and he has refused. His excuse? I don't have enough media presence. I don't have enough subs. Now, AIU has about 5 times more subs than Ask Yourself on his main channel. He then calls AIU's refusal to debate him, quote, cucking into the shadows. Ask Yourself, it's you who's being a hypocrite, and it's you who are cucking into the shadows.
Not an argument.
Let's hear how he did with Sam Harris.
Hey guys, great talk, appreciate it very much.
And there's the first slurp.
Also not an argument.
Appreciate it very much.
Isaac is literally slurping in front of Sam Harris. Yep. Yeah. This is my big moment. Hey, Sam.
Also not an argument. And Tracy of AIU has already put out a salty response.
This is my big moment. Hey, Sam.
Also not an argument. A salty response.
Would justify stabbing them to death for a hamburger.
There he goes. Stabbing to death. They love that expression. Stab.
That's because it's an accurate term that conveys honestly what we are doing without euphemism. Pick up a dictionary.
Actually, by concentrating on the stabbing, you are cherry-picking and sensationalizing the issue. The stabbing of the animals is one of hundreds of procedures that take place in animal agriculture. It is also just one of many issues that the vegan community has with animal agriculture. The issue is whether we should or should not use animals in agriculture for meat consumption. Concentrating on the stabbing is only a tactic. Its sole purpose is designed to appeal to the emotion of your opponent.
Under no circumstance is killing a human being justified for the consumption of their meat. Under no circumstance is killing a human being justified for the consumption of their meat.
Okay, so 2 problems there. Firstly, that statement was deontological, and then secondly, if we interpret that as an answer to name the trait, it produces some absurd consequences. So dealing with the deontology point, if you're truly making the statement that there's no circumstance where it's justified to kill a human and consume their meat, we could scale up the other end of the equation extremely high. We could put in terms of negative consequences, we could put a Holocaust on the other side, we could put a multiverse being tortured to death on the other side, and you would have to say, by that deontological principle, yeah, it's fine to let that happen. That is better than just killing someone and eating their meat.
Okay, this is a perfect example of the tricky, bad faith arguing that Ask Yourself does. So let's take a listen again to exactly what AIU said and what Ask Yourself interpreted what he said.
Killing a human being justified for the consumption of their meat.
Kill a human and consume their meat.
AIU said killing someone for the consumption of their meat. So in other words, killing someone solely for the purpose of consuming their meat. Ask Yourself then switched that to killing a person and consuming their meat. He then went on to describe some bizarre situation where killing someone and consuming their meat, and by doing so, it somehow saves millions or billions of lives. So in that situation, it would be better to kill and consume the person. But in this case, you would be killing a person and consuming their meat for the purpose of saving those lives. AIU described a situation where you kill a person solely for the consumption of their meat, which is totally different than what AIU said and what he meant. This is the bad faith trickery that Ask Yourself constantly uses in his arguments. He does it again and again, and you'll see him do it again later in this video.
It could be wrapped up with humanity. Humanity. Not Zoomanity, Cirque du Soleil's erotic show, which you can watch in Vegas, and I have seen it. No, humanity.
What it's asking you for If you name the trait as humanity, it's okay to kill things that are not human. By that logic, it's fine to murder hypersentient aliens, sentient AI, sentient artificial biological life forms. If we transfer your consciousness into something non-human, it's fine to murder it.
Okay, now this is ridiculous. What AIU obviously meant when he said humanity is that humanity is the dome of protection of those who should not be killed innocently. Ask Yourself then takes that answer, switches it to lack of humanity as his answer for name the trait. He then strawmans that position to agree that it's okay to kill anything that is not human for any reason. It automatically dismisses that there could not be a second or third criteria which allows that protection, such as pets or zoo animals. This is another example of Ask Yourself's bad faith and constant strawmanning of his opponent's arguments.
June 18th, 2017, I named the trait because as a student of ethics and moral psychology, it was so painfully obvious to me, I just thought, why the hell not? In my first video on veganism, I explained the trait separating animals we eat from animals we give equal protection under the law is the status of that animal's standing within our community. Murderers and livestock share the same standing as members outside our communities, and neither receive full protections under the law. At the same time, citizens, humans, non-murderers, and pets all share the same standing as members inside our communities and are entitled to the full protections of the law. It's this status as a social member of the superorganism we call society that separates the man and the cow in Ask Yourself's Name the Trait compliance tactic.
Okay, so he's talking about membership in society, group membership. So I know that Friended, for whatever reason, just does not get this or pretends not to get this, but let me lay it out as obviously and simply and carefully as possible. Friended, you do not accept being murdered because you aren't in someone's group. Therefore, it is a contradiction for you to propose that it is okay to murder others because they are not in your group.
Okay, he's saying it's a contradiction to hold both of those stances. Okay, let's take a look at how many people, or even sentient beings, hold that contradiction. Okay, let's listen to the first stance again.
You do not accept being murdered because you aren't in someone's group.
Okay, it's fair to say that nearly every person who has ever lived, in fact, almost every last living being who has ever lived, is not okay with being murdered for whatever reason. With a strong instinct to survive, nearly every last living being will fight vigorously to not be murdered. Okay, now let's listen to the second stance in this equation to see how many hold this contradiction.
That it is okay to murder others because they are not in your group.
Okay, when he talks about murdering others that are not in their group, he's mainly talking about species. So every animal and insect who kills another animal or insect holds this contradiction. Every person who isn't totally, strictly vegan holds this contradiction. Herbivores like elephants and hippopotamus who frequently kill others outside their group while vigorously defending their own young inside their group, they hold this contradiction. A vast majority of people who have lived in the past 100,000 years have been non-vegan. They have all held this contradiction. This means that an absolute vast majority of all the living creatures who have lived in the past several million years hold this contradiction. So congratulations, Ask Yourself. You've officially Anita Sarkeesian'd logical inconsistencies.
Because when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything
is a contradiction.
And you have to point it all out.
Yeah, when you start calling every last thing that has ever lived, when you call the way they have lived a contradiction, when you call the way they have lived a logical inconsistency, just like saying everything is sexist, you've rendered the term completely meaningless. But I guess at least the vegans are consistent, right? That's right, it's wrong.
And the other little Pomeranian we just got, he can go vegan right now. He has
Okay,
no
so you failed dividing by name the trait because you fed your dog.
No.
Yeah, you fed him meat.
Well, no, I wouldn't consider it ideal to feed it meat, but the thing is, the situation was a little bit more complicated.
Do you have a dog that you feed?
Okay. No, I have 2 cats that I got before I went vegan. So I'm kind of forced to deal with them until, they pass on, but I'm not going to buy any more pets. I'm actually against pet ownership.
Okay, they are on vegan diet, the 2 pets, the 2 cats?
No.
Okay, so you've got your fuck it, the animals are going to die point. And that's given your...
What do you mean?
You've reached there's a certain point where you say, fuck it, the animals are going to die. Mine is I want to eat their meat. You say no, but when it comes to feeding your animals, you say, okay, that's it. Where's the slaughterhouse? I need some food for my cats. So we have just
like I said, I got them before. Like I said, I got them before I went vegan.
Well, that's the problem with Name the Trait, folks. It turns out that everybody is logically inconsistent. So I'm not sure what the point is to the whole thing. Maybe it's some kind of vegan original sin bullshit. I guess vegans need to sit around and say, hey dudes, this'll blow your mind. You gotta realize that all of us are logically inconsistent. Yeah, man. So you can see the whole exercise is pretty meaningless, and it gets away from the core argument of veganism. Okay, I would like to focus in on what the actual core is of the vegan argument, since the vegans themselves seem to have a hard time keeping their focus. Their argument is, due to the negative experience of animals in animal agriculture, those who have reasonable access to plant-based proteins, beans, should substitute them for animal products. Beans are better. That is the core to the vegan argument. And all this nuanced and riddled bullshit, such as Name the Trait, are simply meaningless distractions from the core issues. In fact, watch how quickly I can push Name the Trait into the key vegan argument, which is beans. Name the Trait shows that your worldview is logically inconsistent. Yeah, my Eskimo friend over here, his worldview is logically inconsistent too, but you have no problem with him. That's different. He doesn't have access to beans. You see, the logical inconsistency outlined in Name the Trait is completely meaningless to the 99.99% of humans who have throughout history have not had access to a healthy plant-based diet. Beans are better is the core issue, whether we should or should not include animals in agriculture for meat consumption, whether or not there are health issues with being on a full vegan diet. These are the key issues, not some ridiculous, pointless, logical consistency riddle. In fact, let's listen to Sam Harris's response to your ridiculous riddle and see if he agrees with this.
I think that it's impossible to defend factory farming as it is. I mean, knowing the details. I think it's just, we want to solve that problem somehow, right? And yet, I happen to think that it's not at all obvious that we can all be vegans and be healthy. And when I've run that experiment on myself, it's, I became anemic when the first time I was a vegetarian for 6 years. All kinds of things go sideways in my blood the last time I did this experiment for a year. Now, no doubt with more intelligence or more attention to the details, most people can solve those problems for themselves as a vegan or a vegetarian. but perhaps not everyone can, right? And I think there may be another solution. I mean, I'm hopeful that this clean meat revolution that is struggling to be born will be one solution. So if you really are worried just about the experience of conscious creatures, there is a way of flipping this around. I have no illusions that this will convince you, a committed vegan or vegetarian, but you have to have an actual counter argument if you stipulate what I want you to stipulate here. If it's possible to raise livestock under conditions where they're really living lives worth living, right? So that you can really have happy cows or happy ducks or chickens or pigs, which is to say, it would be better for those animals to have been than to not have been. These are net positive lives. Well, then that's a world in which veganism is not actually the most compassionate solution. That would be a world in which bringing those billions of creatures into existence and giving them net positive lives would be better than not, if you think well-being aggregates in some way. If you have the intuition that having a world with 7 billion happy people is better than a world with 2 billion happy people, stipulating that happiness accrues in some sense, you can run that same experiment. Now, I'm not saying we're anywhere near there with respect to our current practices, and I would completely support every differentiation one wanted to make with respect to the ethics of treating animals well, but it's not given all of the moving parts, it's not a straightforward question of saying, well, obviously everyone should be vegan right now.
So you can see Harris glossed over your ridiculous premise and got into the key issues of veganism. Name the trait is ridiculous, trivial, pointless, meaningless. It's nothing more than a tricky riddle. It speaks to no key veganism issue. Name the trait is worthless.
Everything is sexist. Everything is racist. Everything
is a contradiction. That is not consistent. That is not consistent.
Everything
is not consistent.
And you have to point it all out. Everything is
not consistent.
Everything is
contradiction.
And you have to point it all out.